Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We got Grant Anderson back joining us again today. On the last episode, he just gave us a ton of knowledge, a ton of information about the 1031 exchange. We're going to do the same thing and just kind of pick his brain a little bit about the BRRRR strategy. And then we're going to kind of wrap up of like how he's kind of putting those both together and how you can utilize, doing a little bit of everything. That's what investors should be doing, problem solving, figuring out how to kind of use different strategies, whether it's exit strategies or different financial strategies, kind of putting those things together to get the most out of your investments. And Indianapolis is just such a great place to do that. And Grant, I want to kind of just start this episode off with, so you and your wife, Rebecca, moved here from California to do some investing. And she's a retail broker as well. So you guys, and she works with a lot of investors, works on buying and selling all over Indianapolis. They have an awesome team over their front porch that she works with. But I want to kind of start off with just like, what does that mean for you guys to be able to kind of do that together and be on this journey of, hey, even moving from California to like, hey, where we're investing and being there, but kind of being in the same, in that real estate space together. What's that mean for you, man?
I mean, it's awesome. I have my partner working with me all the time. We do have separate offices, so I want to clarify that. She's in the attic, I'm in the basement, so we're separated between a level. Well, I don't think we could do it if we're sitting right next to each other. I'd probably bother her too much. But I mean, I love it. It's somebody, first off, getting your significant other involved in what you're doing with real estate, in anything really, is awesome. To be able to get them on board to say, hey, I believe in what we're doing, what we're trying to build. And then it becomes a team. And now it's not just like me against the world, it's us against the world or something like that, So it's great to have somebody who I can always depend on, who I can talk to. She has a real estate license, so we don't have to call up my agent and say, hey, I want to go look at this property. She can run comps for me like that. So there's a lot of benefits to either you personally having your license or having a significant other have your license. She can list all of our flips that we do. She can help us look for properties if we're looking for a rental property, anything. So it's amazing to have such a supportive wife and a relationship. So I love it.
Yeah. And if anybody knows Rebecca out there, she's like she's always smiling, always like positive, always have that bringing the energy and stuff like that. So very cool. But I can attest to what you're saying. So my wife, Anna, is now on team with us as well. And like kind of, we're doing the same thing. She's on the second floor working right now. I'm on the third floor working right now. That's how we're doing things here. But yeah, I can understand of like what you're saying of like, hey, bringing that, significant other in on what you're doing and being involved in it. It makes a pretty big difference. And I know I've heard that from a lot of investors too, of not necessarily, hey, you have to be on the same team together or work together every day and anything like that. But, if you're investing in whether it's Indianapolis or somewhere else, and all of a sudden your significant other understands what you're doing and you involved in what's going on, when they have that buy-in too, like anything I've seen is like, hey, let's buy more properties. Let's get some more investments and stuff. So definitely a cool thing.
I'll give one plug to cash flow, the game Cash Flow. Mm-hmm. That was one of the ways that I got my wife involved in really like, oh, wow, I want to do this investing. Yeah. It's playing the board game Cash Flow, created by Robert Kiyosaki. If you haven't heard about it, look it up. It's an awesome game. I love playing it, by the way.
It's definitely fun. Definitely good stuff. Before we get into talking about the BRRRR strategy and stuff, I do want to talk to you of, since you've been investing in Indianapolis for a while, and then moved out here. And then even with Rebecca, like, working, as an agent on the retail side with a lot of things, from what you guys have seen over the last, 4+ years you guys have been out here, of how much the Indianapolis market has changed and like just how kind of cool it is to be involved in it right now and kind of see that change fairly quickly. And then also kind of also be in that phase of like, oh man, what's going on? I need a property. Like, how do I get it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been awesome seeing all the rehabs that are going on in some of the neighborhoods that are really, you could drive down the road before and you're like, man, I just see these beat up houses. And then now you're seeing these houses that are being rebuilt and rehabbed. And it's awesome to see as a city and just changing that inner city feel that, I mean, we live in Fountain Square and we can see it all over our neighborhood, that we're so close to downtown. It's just an awesome feel. I would say that even how, difficult they say it is, there's always deals out there for
Yeah.
people, and don't get bogged down by, oh, there's no deals out there. And I remember when I first came here, a lot of people were saying that when I first came here. And I would say, well, these are great deals, and when I talked to them, they would say, well, I'm used to making $500 a door. I'm like, well, I would love to make $500 a door, but I'm okay making, $300 or $200 a door. So especially the older people who have been around for a long time, thinking, man, I need to make $500 to $1,000 a door or something like that. It might not be happening anymore.
Right.
So if they want to continue buying, they have to change how they evaluate a deal and what is a deal.
Yeah.
And it's not always about how much cash flow. I look at the long term on most of the properties we buy. As you know, I buy in high B or high C, B neighborhoods. So we're spending a little bit more money, but I know that property value is probably going to stay a little bit longer. Yeah. And they're going to be worth more. And in 30 years, when they're paid off, they're worth more than the lower end properties. So that's why I like the little bit higher end properties.
Yeah. And that's just that. I mean, that's business and investing in general. Like, you have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to, kind of go with it is. If I'm a flipper and I need to make, I need to flip, one property, or I need to make 20 grand every 3 months on flips. Then if I can't do it with one property, I need to do it on two. And that's just kind of how you have to adjust. So, all right. So Grant, I want to get into the BRRRR strategy here and just kind of dig into this with you and talk through this. I know you lead, I'm not sure if you're still doing it. Sorry if you're not, but you're still leading the BRRRR subgroup and everything through Cyria?
BRRRR strategy subgroup with Cyria. Yes, I still do that.
So good stuff. I know I went to it one time and got to be involved in there, and man, they were just asking some amazing questions and things. And I was pretty impressed with how you are running that group and everything. So great job there. When we're talking about the BRRRR strategy, we're talking about, so you're going to buy a property, you're going to renovate it, you're going to rent it out, you're going to refinance it, and then you're going to just redo it again. So that's what we're talking about here. And Grant, if you're okay with this, what I want to kind of do is just kind of break down each of those 5 things and just kind of dig into it a little bit. And then we'll get into, hey, some things you need to be careful of, that type of stuff. So when we're talking about buying a property, so if you're planning on doing the BRRRR strategy and you're looking to buy a property, what are some of the things that people need to consider and understand before they actually purchase that property?
Well, I would say first they have to look at themselves and find out exactly what type of properties they want to own. Do they want to own, the lower end properties and lower income neighborhoods? Do they want to own properties in high neighborhoods? It all depends on exactly what their goals are. So the first thing I would say is figure out what your goals are. I know, like I said before, a lot of people start with the lower end and then they get burned out and they go to the higher end. I just kind of jumped into a little bit of the median, like the C neighborhoods, and then just never went back down, just kept kind of hovering right around there because I like those neighborhoods. Yeah. I like being in areas where there's more owner occupants. Yeah. But the prices are reflective, so I'm going to pay more for that. And my cash flow is going to be a little bit lower. I always look at what rehab can be done. So typically I know almost any property I buy, doesn't matter, except if it's maybe a brand new construction, I'm going to spend about $3 grand fixing things up. Like I know even if I don't want to do the BRRRR strategy, I know I'm going to probably spend $3,000 at least on, just making the property more rentable, and things come up on inspections. So I know I'm going to have to do some work to it, but I want to look at properties that are, and I want to evaluate it based on what other people are doing in that neighborhood and what other houses are selling. I typically like to rehab it so I get almost the highest value I possibly can by saving as much money. So if the cabinets are nice, I don't want to rip them out and put new ones in. I might just paint them and resurface the countertop as compared to pulling them out, which is going to cost more, pull them out, put in new ones. But I want to try and get that ARV as high as possible. So when I do my refinance at the end, I get the most money back.
Yeah.
and I leave the least amount of money in the property.
Right. So yeah, that's a really good point too, of just kind of knowing, I like that you mentioned, like knowing what's going on in the neighborhoods. So you know kind of what finishes you need to put in there to,
Yeah.
like you said, get the most bang out of your buck, but not go over the top too, or leave something on the table there by not going enough. So kind of knowing that stuff I think is really important as well. So let's talk about those kind of that renovation and stuff. So you want to find, you generally want to find something that you want to add some value to. You want to be able to renovate in some way. So and I feel like this is one of the things that a lot of people that are doing the BRRRR strategy this is where one of the errors usually comes up, I think, is when whether it's the cost of the renovation or the time of the renovation things. I feel like this is kind of where maybe the most mistakes are made when people are doing the BRRRR strategy a little bit.
Yeah, and I really like the ones where I'm just going and doing paint and carpet. I mean,
Yeah.
really, because if I'm just doing paint, carpet, or paint, flooring, and just fixing miscellaneous things, I'm in and out in about $15,000 to $20,000. I'm in and out of the property in about 30 days, as compared to a big, huge rehab where I may be in the property for 6 months. So if you have hard money loan, 6 months you're paying interest and you're not getting anything in return. You're not getting any type of rent. So you have to have deep enough pockets to keep paying that. And then when you refinance it, hopefully you get all of that back, but you still have to make those payments. So I like to get them rented out as quickly as possible. And that's another reason why I like to do some of the newer properties, because I don't have to tear out the walls and make it open concept or things like that. I could just make it in and out real quick, get it back on the market, get it rented, have a lease, show the bank, and then now the bank will fund it because I have a lease on it.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to do the smaller end, but there's more opportunities in the larger the larger rehabs. So if you're using private money, or if you're using hard money, just make sure you budget for making those payments every single month while you're going through the rehab phase. And then once you're done, get it rented out as quickly as possible and then refinance it.
Yeah. So that's something that, when Grant brought up at the beginning of, like, when you're looking to buy a property, you kind of have to know what strategy you want, kind of what area you want to be in, what type of property you want to have, that type of thing. It's the same thing when you're looking at, your renovation of, like, hey, how much renovation am I used to? How much can I take on? Obviously if there's a bigger rehab, it's going to take more time. There's maybe a little bit more opportunity, but there's also a lot more things that can go wrong and a lot more things that you can mess up within your budget or time frame and all that stuff too. So knowing, just like you are going to strategize, like, what type of property I want, you also need to know, hey, what type of rehab do I want? Grant has selected his, he's identified his. You can tell by the way he's talking about it, like, hey, this is my strategy. This is what I do. That's why I'm having him on here, because he's successful at what he's doing, because he knows what he wants to do. And every now and then you're going to be tempted to, like, kind of pull out of, like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I can take on this bigger rehab and stuff. But that's where people, it's like, hey, that's not your strategy. That's not what you've done in the past. That's where some of those mistakes are made in things. And then it's kind of the same thing too with, like, that decision making of, like, what kind of tenant do I want in there? So when I'm able to rent it, how quickly can I rent it out? How quickly our property is going to be rented out in a certain area? And then what type of tenant, am I looking to put in there? What do I need my rent to be for all those things? Grant, what's some of the, some advice you have for people are, I guess when they're evaluating or estimating, like, hey, where should my rent be, or what do I need it to be? This is where I feel like some people make mistakes too, because they are promised, if they're talking to some wholesaler that doesn't really know how to run numbers, they're just looking at Rentometer or whatever. They're saying, like, oh yeah, you can rent this for $1,000, but realistically, maybe you can get a tenant in there for like $850. Give some advice to some people out there that are going through that of, like, hey, knowing where their rents really need to be, and how you kind of go about that.
Well, first off, I would say never trust what the wholesaler, a wholesaler, or even real estate agents for that matter, tell you. You have to trust but verify.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even the most experienced person can make mistakes.
Yeah.
And simple wholesaling, they give out all of the information they possibly can, but you have to make your own evaluations for yourself. So the first thing that I would do, especially for rentals, is if I have a property manager, I would contact them and say, this is the property I'm looking at. What type, where should we be at with the rents? But then I would even take their number, and there's a couple of resources. One, you can look on Zillow. Now, Zillow has a rent Zestimate down at the bottom. I wouldn't necessarily use that. It's probably just as good as the Zillow Zestimate.
Yeah.
But you can get a feel for what's on the market in the neighborhood because people list their properties on Zillow. And so you can look to see, what are they charging? What do those properties look like? How well are those done compared to what you're going to be doing? What are those rents? Is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath compared to yours that's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, right? Like, so you have to look at all of those and then kind of adjust your prices based on what you see. And then there's Rentometer as well. So Rentometer does kind of the same thing. If you pay for the Pro, which I think is about $199 a year or something, you can go in and they'll give you other other properties that have rented out in that neighborhood. You could also ask your real estate agent. A lot of people don't realize this, but your real estate agent can pull up rental comps as well, and they'll show what it rented for and what is on the market. So Zillow will only show you what's on the market, not what they rented for.
Right.
At least your agent can show you what is rented and what was rented for, because that's what they'll show you. So I would look at those ways to find out what the rents are. And I would do that obviously before I even did the purchase.
Yeah.
You know, you're just running your numbers, making sure that this is going to be a viable thing. Then run it again, especially depending on how long your rehab took, to see if you're still in line.
Yeah. So definitely just 100% on all this stuff of like, I can't reiterate as like I do this every day, but there's still times that like, hey, maybe I'm off a little bit, or it's going to happen. But whether it's your ARV that you're figuring out, or your rehab costs to figure it out, or your rent value to figure out, like, always make sure you get, like Grant said, trust but verify. Make sure that you can, if you're working with your real estate agent or a trusted wholesaler or something like that, you can look at their numbers, you can trust their numbers, but don't necessarily go by. Make sure you're getting a third opinion or a second opinion, a third opinion. You're verifying all that stuff, because when you're going through this, it's easy to kind of make mistakes on what's going on and things too. So I like that a lot. Thanks a lot, Grant, for that insight there. And then on the refinance side then too, let's go through that process, just like kind of how that refinance works. Of like, hey, you bought the property, you've renovated it, you've rented it out, now you're refinancing it. Like, what's a little bit on that through that process of what people need to know about?
So hopefully, again, you've set this up kind of before you did your buy, what you can get approved for on your loan, different aspects like how many other rental properties do you have. I know when we first started, we would go out and get a traditional loan. It maxed out at about 5. Once we did more than 5, it started becoming more and more difficult to get the cash out. So they'd allow us to refinance, but I didn't want to refinance just the hard money loan or the private loan. I wanted to get my money, most of my money back too. So doing that cash out part was starting to get more difficult. So just identifying the lender that you're going to use beforehand, making sure that you have your ducks in a row, so that when you get it all purchased and rented out, you don't come up and say, well, I can't refinance this now, I can't get my money back. Finding out that, and then also if you have more properties and you have more loans, figure out ways that you can do it. If you're married, maybe you can buy 5 and then your wife could buy 5. Or if you have a business partner, you can buy 5 and your business partner can buy 5. And then after that, you would start going into, commercial loans. And we use Hendricks County Bank and we use North Salem State Bank, and they loan directly to our LLC. The terms are not as favorable as they are on a traditional mortgage. They're 20-year terms. They're not fixed rate for the full term, but they're fully amortized, which I like. Yeah. So I never have to worry about them pulling the loan or having to refinance that later on. But I have the variable of the interest rate risk going up or down, depending on what it'll be when it renews itself.
So yeah, good stuff. And then the last step is you just want to redo it. So just,
Yeah.
just basically what you do, find that other property again, run all your numbers, and then, refinance and do that. So, Grant, so as you've gone through this, what are some of the mistakes that you've made on that, maybe those first couple of deals that you're like, okay, I know better now and I'm not going to do that anymore, that we can put out there so people can kind of they can learn from your mistakes a little bit.
Well, one of them is not going with my gut.
Yeah.
So my gut told me not to buy a house, and I did, because I was trying to justify it, like, hey, I want a deal, I need a deal, and just trying to justify it. And my gut was saying, no, you shouldn't do it. And we ended up losing money on that property.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing. And then two, I don't like to refinance after I get that long-term loan in. So a lot of people will say, hey, let's just refinance it out and get your money back. Well, when you really calculate it out, the initial purchase, with the first few years, you're almost all interest. So if you had that property for 2 years, you're paying almost all interest, and then you refinance it, and now you're, for the first 2 years, almost paying all interest again.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, I've learned that from the past, like, refinancing things, like if I decide not to refinance, then I'll build more equity into that property. Maybe I can get a line of credit instead, or do something else, do a 1031 exchange, sell the property or something like that, to get into a better property. Those are and then I manage my own properties. Renting to friends and family, don't do that.
So yeah, that can go. Some people say, oh yeah, it's fine and things, but yeah, we'll see. The verdict's still out on stuff like that. So Grant's learned not to do that. So if any of his relatives are listening to this, hopefully they're not.
Well, I just assume I'm not going to get paid rent, and if I do, that's a benefit.
Yeah. So, Grant, I know that a handful of investors that are, maybe they get hung up on the BRRRR strategy, or, have some trouble with it, are ones that maybe they're not allowing themselves to go through the seasoning process maybe as much, or they're not willing to maybe leave a little bit of money left in that deal when they refinance and stuff like that. What's something like when somebody's kind of stuck in that? Is that like just like, hey, you're pushing too much, or you're gonna be over leveraged, or what's some just advice that you have as somebody that's been through this, of like for those people that are kind of sitting in that phase?
Yeah, I mean, our average, and we're dealing with a little bit higher end properties, our average is about $15,000 that we have in each property at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So you're probably going to leave money in, and I'm okay with that, because I still have an asset that has value. And if you look at the return on just that $15,000, if you're making $100 or $200 a month in cash flow, that's a pretty good return off of 15,000, right? So you have to look at that. And then I always say, look at the whole thing in general. You're building wealth over the long period of time. Your tenant is paying down your mortgage. Just make sure that there is enough money coming in to cover all of those expenses, the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance. And if you start to over leverage, where is that money going to come from? If you're a doctor, or an attorney, or making ungodly amounts of money, or a CEO or something, making a lot of money, then maybe you can say, I'm willing to buy this property and pay a little bit extra every single month and lose a little bit, because I know that I'm still building that equity. I'm building this, but you still have to rely on your 9-to-5 W-2 job, or your normal amount where you're getting money to pay for that.
Yeah.
So eventually, if you ever want to quit, you won't be able to do that if you have too many of those properties. Again, when you have more properties as well, you can take some profit from this property and move it over to pay for a negative on this property. So sometimes it negates each other when you get more properties under your belt. But you have to start with the first one.
Yeah. So, any other advice for anybody out there that's kind of like, hey, I've done a couple of these, or I'm getting ready to do my first one. What's some advice you have for somebody that's in that phase right there?
I'd say, if you're doing your first one, I was always under the assumption, just go out there and do it. You know, don't worry about setting up an LLC. Don't worry about, you know, how, yeah, like some of the minutiae stuff, like worry about how you're going to rent it out, what the rehab is, and if you're going to do the work or if you're going to have a contractor, how much is your purchase price and can you refinance it? And how are you going to pay for the purchase to get to the refinance? So I think those are the biggest things. So if you have bad credit, well, okay, maybe you could partner with somebody, you know, figure out what you can do to get around some things that you may have issues, but don't necessarily worry yourself with a lot of the lower end things, because you can fix those along the way. Again, even with owning a rental property, if you make a mistake, so if you overpay or if you over improve, you have time. You're not flipping a house. So if you're flipping a house and you make a mistake, that could cost you all your profit or even making any money. With the rental properties, you're going over time. So even if the prices never rise, the debt is being paid down. So eventually that debt will be paid off, and that'll overcome all of your maybe little mistakes that you made in the beginning. I just say, go do it. and you'll definitely learn your way of doing things.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And I think it's really good advice. I think a lot of people maybe lose sight of that too. It's not about kind of like what's kind of going in your pocket necessarily right now. It's what's going to be going in your pocket, 10, 15 years ago, what you can pass down to your children, like those types of things that whatever that long-term play is, that's what you're focused on, and stay towards that. So yeah, man, I really like that. I want to also pick your brain a little bit about, cause I really like that you do this. And I think a lot of people would maybe learn from this too, is that you self-manage your rental portfolio. Of just kind of how you, like, number one, like kind of made that decision, and just like, then you, like, do you kind of have a number of like, okay, when I get to this, then I definitely, and then I need to bring on a property manager, and, or is it like, hey, no, I'm just going to write it out as long as I can, or like how, like that, going through that and that process of, and you still continuing to do that, how has that maybe benefited you? And like, are you going to like continue to do that, or what's that experience been like?
So I have had property managers in the past, and especially when we bought some of our first rental properties, they were out in Oklahoma. We had a property manager, and actually one of them they had college students living in the house. And well, actually, this is what they told me, and I don't know if it's true. They had college students living in the house, which they did. And the students really messed up the property. And they showed me photos of this house that had holes in it. Well, I can't tell, because I'd never seen the property. I can't tell if it was my property that had the holes in the walls, or if it was your property that had the holes in the wall, right? Yeah. Well, she was trying to collect money from the students and all this, and she wouldn't return my phone calls eventually, because after I was trying to be involved and everything. If you have a property manager, be involved in what they're doing, know how to look at the statement every month, ask questions if you have questions. Well, she stopped answering questions, so I moved to another property manager. 2 months later, my new property manager told me that my old property manager was arrested for taking money from other investors. So from investors claiming that there was this damage, and there really wasn't.
Wow.
So first you have to make sure you get a reputable property manager if you are going to use one. Yeah. And after that, that's when I decided, property managers are great because they take a lot off of people's plates. And if you're out of state, or if you don't want to deal with it, they're great to do. It's my business. I wanted to take that over and just make sure that I'm the one responsible. So if my property sits vacant for 2 months, it's my responsibility. I can't blame it on my property manager. Yeah. It's my responsibility to get it rented out. Also, I figured out ways of trying to get more money. I had a property recently. It was listed for $1,400 a month. I'm getting $1,470 a month. So I was able to add more benefits to that person, and get more money. So that puts in my pocket, what, $840 a year.
Yep.
Then my next year, it goes up 2.9% automatic increase. So now that, goes up again. So, and that's already included in there. So I'm able to do things that maybe a property manager don't do because they don't have the time, or, they have too many properties.
Yeah.
I'm able to focus in on that. And it's just basically figuring out, how am I going to rent this property out, knowing the laws to make sure that you're following the rules, and having a good team of maintenance people. A lot of people say, I don't want to own rental properties because I'm going to get calls at 2:00 in the morning. I have, to this day, never gotten a call past like 9:00 and earlier than maybe 9:00 at night, and maybe earlier than like 8:00 in the morning. So I've never had a call. Now, things break on Thanksgiving, and I might get a call that something's broken. What am I supposed to do? I mean, I just get the person out there as soon as possible. I'm not going to do anything to it. I'm not going to go over there and fix it. I don't do that.
Yeah.
So, I'm okay taking a phone call. Okay, yeah, I'll maybe stress for 5 minutes trying to figure things out and try and help them out as much as I can. But at the end of the day, there's not much I can do.
Yeah.
If your house is on fire, don't call me, call the fire department,
Right. So no, that's great. So no, I think it's always something that people, maybe need to consider and kind of can kind of do and stuff. And I know some people that, whether they're operating on their own or even operating like through a virtual assistant even, or just you have some help and have people, man the phones and things like that. I think it is a possibility of what you want to do, but it kind of comes into the same thing of know your strategy, know what you want to do.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, I don't want anything to do with it. I want to be hands off. Yeah. You need a property manager then. But you still need to manage your property manager. You need to be involved in it. You need to do that. So, Grant, before we get you out of here today, I do want to kind of finish up with, we had you on the previous episode talking about 1031 exchanges, talking about the BRRRR strategy here today. Like, and you're doing both of these and you're kind of combining both of these as well. Can you talk us through that a little bit of how you're kind of utilizing both of these strategies together to kind of get you to where you and Rebecca want to be down the line?
Yeah. So basically what we were doing is, each time we would sell one property out in California, we would do a 1031 exchange. So, one of my examples is that I bought a property out in California, and after we refinanced it, we had zero into that property. So we took zero money into that property. Then we refinanced it, or we held on to that, I think, for 3 years out in California. It went up. We got about $100,000 that we were able to buy 3 other properties out here in Indianapolis. We did the BRRRR strategy with, and we purchased them and we rehabbed them. And out of that $100,000 that we put into it, we ended up getting $40,000 after we refinanced it. So we basically took tax-free money from this property over here and took $40,000 out. And it took it took 3 years and then about 6 months after we sold the house to get that money. But now we have 3 houses. We got the $40,000. So even if my cash flow is a little bit lower, I have $40,000 to keep paying more.
Right.
And that was $40,000 above and beyond. I mean, that's $40,000 that we wouldn't be able to take out anywhere else.
Right.
So then we were able to use that to buy more properties. We were able to use it basically whatever we wanted. So that's why I like to learn. I would like to constantly try and learn about things. I've bought houses with owner financing. I've bought houses from wholesalers. I've bought houses on my own, dealing with owners. I don't necessarily like that because I'm not good building relationships with them, but I've done it. I've bought houses from real estate agents. I've bought a note before. I've gone into a syndication with an apartment complex. So I'm always trying to learn new strategies and doing new strategies. We've sold a house on owner financing. We've, done subject to. So I'm always looking at how I can keep learning and keep growing because it grows my toolbox. So now I say, this scenario matches this tool. So I can pull that tool out. And I don't want to be the one person that just has a hammer when you need a screwdriver, right? I want to have all those tools to say, I can do this. And there's many different things that you can do once you start learning one thing and you start thinking about it, and then you combine them together and you go, wow. And the light bulb goes off and you go, man, I can really do something with this, or create money in some way or another, create cash flow, create something that somebody else didn't even think about.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I love that, of being able to use multiple ways, like you said, that tool analogy of like having multiple things in your toolbox that you're able to utilize depending on the situation and stuff. You know, if you're in a situation like, hey, I don't really like this neighborhood anymore, I don't really want to hold a rental here, but maybe I can own or finance it. All of a sudden I still have that check coming in for the next, 15, 20 years, and it's good to go, but you don't have to worry about the property anymore. So just, there's a lot of different strategies, a lot of different things you can do within real estate. And I mean, I really appreciate your mind and the way it works, and this your continuation of like, hey, I want to learn this, I want to try to figure this out, and things like that. And I think a lot of real estate investors can learn from that, of like, I like to say, everything's a possibility. So whatever it can be done, there's a good chance you can figure it out, and then just get plugged in with people that are doing different things and having conversations with different things. It's kind of the whole idea behind this podcast too, of even just opening it up of like, hey, what are other people doing that maybe it'll pique somebody's interest out there and stuff. So Grant, really appreciate you and really appreciate your insights on these last couple episodes. If somebody wants to reach out to you to just find out more about you or what you're doing, or just have maybe a follow-up question or anything, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, it's my phone number is 916-616-1264. Email address is grant@thegoodlifeproperties.com. And I'm always willing to help everybody out. And, I appreciate you guys having me on and sharing some knowledge, and hopefully somebody got at least one little thing out of it.
I guarantee they did that. You had quite a few great little golden nuggets in there, Grant. So like I said, really appreciate it, man. Great job today. And for everybody out there, let us know how we can help you out in any way. If you need anything from me, you can reach out to me at brian@simplewholesaling.com. More than happy to help. And with that, that's a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.